the creations.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Yep. No, that's good.
Okay, so we feature speakers who are exploring the nexus between spirituality, cosmology, and activism, which echo the three vocations of creation spirituality: mysticism, creativity, and transformation. This series is offered to the broader creation spirituality community to guide us in responding to our environmental crisis as people who hold the earth and all life sacred. Your hosts for this session are me, Gail Sophia Ransom, D-Min, from the Boston Basin region on land ceded from the Massachusetts tribe, and Penny Anderson, D-Min, from the Great Lakes bioregion, ceded from the Ho-Chunk people. Our tech support is provided by Bob Eisenberger from Toronto, a longtime student of creation spirituality who lives on land ceded from the Mississaugas of the Credit River Nation, also part of the Great Lakes bioregion. We are all here today live on a planet Earth, which is descended from the original particles, elements, and creative powers of our universe, set in motion 13.7 billion years ago. It's good to be alive today, and it's good to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you.
For those of you who have been with us before, you'll remember our practice. Well, we're actually asking you to do one of two things today. If during the proceedings you have a question or a comment for Michael, you are free to put that into the chat, and Gail and Penny and I will be tracking that, and we'll try to work those questions into the ongoing conversation. Alternatively, you can also, under reactions, you can click on the button that says raise hand, and that will show up on the screen, and we will do our best to call on you to get to the right point in the conversation. So from there, I'll turn it over to Penny.
Victoria has asked, will there be a recording? And yes, there will. And usually it's out by tomorrow, isn't it? Typically.
Yeah, usually within 24 hours, I manage to get it uploaded.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome. Welcome. I thought I'd open with a reading called For When People Ask. And I invite you just to relax into this reading as we prepare to hear Michael's post-doom conversation with us. For when people ask, I want a word that means okay and not okay. More than that, a word that means devastated and stunned with joy. I want the word that says, I feel it all at once. The heart is not like a songbird singing only one note at a time. It's more like a Tuvan throat singer, able to sing both a drone and simultaneously 2 or 3 harmonics high above it. A sound, the Tuvans say, that gives the impression of wind swirling among the rocks. The heart understands swirl, how the churning of opposite feelings weaves through us like an insistent breeze, leads us wordlessly deeper into ourselves, blesses us with paradox, so we might walk more openly into this world so rife with devastation, this world so ripe with joy.
Wow,
And-
that was awesome.
Well, I think we'll just let Michael begin because I believe most of you know why you're here and what we are about to hear. So welcome, Michael, back to our community.
Thank you. Thank you so much, all three of you. Thank you. So I'm going to do a screen share here. Okay, can y'all see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So today's session, the big picture, clarity, compassion, courageous love in action. Last month, those of you that were here know that I did what every Earth activist needs to know. And apparently, and I'm grateful, supremely grateful, that the questions that were generated by last month's session, or that were, collated by Penny, Bob, and Gail, were these. There was some resistance to your word hopium. For some, that which you call courageous love in action is what they would call hope, as in Joanna Macy's active hope. Could you expand on your understanding of hope as you use it in the word hopium? How do you see us moving through the emotional field of depression over the news that you have presented to the positivity of clarity, compassion, and courageous love in action? Many of us were struck by your comment about your granddaughter's life being much shorter than yours. You say that you accept her shorter life, but do you joyfully accept how her life will end? And several people have wondered how you regard the non-material energies that move about the biosphere, like the human spirit, divine powers, quantum fields, the power of love, and the creativity of the young. What if your clarity, compassion, and courageous love in action actually create an energy wave so large that it alters your predicted course? So I actually made a whole bunch of changes in my program so that as I go through, many of these will be addressed, but I'll also come back to these specific questions during the first time that we'll break. And I imagine breaking twice, actually, for questions and response. So I think I shared this last time, but I think it's vital. It's a quote from Stephen Jenkinson, the famous grief walker. And hope-free is being neither hopeful nor hopeless. He says, grief requires us to know the time we're in. The great enemy of grief is hope. Hope is the four-letter word for people who are unwilling to know things for what they are. Our time requires us to be hope-free, to burn through the false choice of being hopeful or hopeless. They are two sides of the same con job. Grief is required to proceed. And then, of course, Joanna Macy's famous line, the depth of your grief is the measure of your love. And I would suggest that our unwillingness to feel the grief is what keeps most of us from post-doom. We still hang out in doom because we've not allowed ourselves to grieve. So the stages of grief, famously articulated at first by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and then validated by many, many people. And of course, we don't necessarily go through these in exactly this order, and sometimes we cycle back. But denial is actually a stage of grief. It's our inability to allow ourselves to even feel grief and what we think is causing it. Anger, we almost all feel these at some time. Bargaining, depression. Acceptance and collapse acceptance and the possibility, not necessarily the inevitability, but the possibility of near-term human extinction. Collapse awareness is very different than a collapse acceptance. And then collapse trust is really finding the gifts. That's where we start experiencing the profound benefits of post-doom. And then gallows humor. If you don't have gallows humor, then you're not in full acceptance, and you're definitely not in the place of benefits yet. And really, doom and gloom is a bouncing back and forth, as the Buddhists regularly say, and a number of Buddhist teachers, including Joanna Macy and Meg Wheatley especially, and Catherine Ingram and others, that we bounce back and forth. Grief and hope and fear are two sides of a single coin, and we bounce back and forth between them. And post-doom, no gloom is that place of acceptance, finding the gift, and gallows humor. And this is really where trusting reality, trusting life, trusting the universe, trusting the way things really are, which is simply a secular way of saying faith in God. And as many of you know, when I spell the word God, I spell G, Earth emoji D, because any concept of God that doesn't include our biophysical creator, sustainer, and end is an ecocidal notion of the divine. And here's a few examples of gallows humor. Please note, the post-apocalyptical fiction section has been moved to current affairs. I know you wrote this as a bleak vision of a dystopian future, but today we can sell it as a fond remembrance of the good old days. A few of us are going out after work to pretend it's not the end of the world if you want to join us. Being a dinosaur sounds kind of nice. No bills, no work, just extinct. And then this isn't humor, but this is a heartful comment. Ah, kindness. What a simple way to tell another struggling soul that there is love to be found in the world. Oh, by the way, Penny, I just absolutely have to have that quote that you started with. And I like this one too. No matter how educated, talented, rich, or cool you believe you are, how you treat people ultimately tells all. So I could not have possibly been more pleased when somebody sent me just a couple of days ago Matt Fox's daily meditation that he offered on the 31st of July. And it is the most hope-free, hopium-free thing I think I've ever experienced of Matt. Now, he may have been solidly there for a long time. I just don't know. But there's no hope. I mean, no hopium, and it's really hope-free. It's just profound. I just love that we're singing from the same hymnal, and I'm convinced of it now. So just to define my terms, and a little bit of this I covered last time, I don't want to go a little deeper. Hopium, a comforting vision of the future that requires breaking the laws of physics, biology, or ecology. Addiction to false, literally impossible hopes. Irrational or unwarranted optimism that promises short-term relief but delivers crushing disappointment and despair when reality inevitably bites. Any hope that leads us to put off or not prioritize what matters most, individually and collectively, and I'll have a lot to say about that. And then believing that the climate crisis can be fixed or solved by doubling down on the very things causing ecocide in the first place. So that's hopium. I love this quote from Hannah Arendt. Hope is a dangerous barrier to acting courageously in dark times. In hope, the soul overleaps reality, as in fear, it shrinks back from it. Hope precludes peace of mind and corrupts action. Now, what you should know is that my name is Michael Brian Patrick Dowd. So, it's not cool to quote yourself. So that's Brian Patrick. But what I mean by that is that hope precludes peace of mind and heart, because you're bouncing back and forth between hope and fear, hope and fear, hope and fear. So you don't really genuinely have deep peace of mind and heart. And hope-inspired actions often, but not necessarily, lead good people to support precisely what is defiling the body of God, what's destroying the living world, and causing the sixth mass extinction in the first place. So hope-inspired actions actually often lead to good people with the best of intentions doing things that are actually exacerbating ecological overshoot, which is, of course, our major issue. Just last night, Connie and I watched this amazing documentary on Bill W. I've been in recovery for 30 years. And this is a documentary on Bill W., the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, and Yo-Yo Ma does the music. And it is so fabulous. And I realized that I am just as passionate about helping people to recover from hopium, because I think hopium addiction is doing more damage to our planet and to our species legacy than any other single thing. So that's why I created this video called Hopium Detox and Recovery, Accepting and Trusting Unstoppable Collapse. And another video I've been working on for almost 2 months that I'll be recording probably tomorrow is Hopium Dealers Hall of Fame, with a nod to Guy McPherson. And I count myself from 2000 to 2012 as being a notorious hopium peddler. Many of you have experienced me in my hopium dealer days. To have even the slimmest chance of avoiding becoming evil on a geological timescale, we must overcome hopium addiction and minimize deadliest toxicity, nuclear, methane, chemicals, basically doing everything we can. And the thing is, we're not going to do this if we have hopium. If we think civilization can be saved, if we think that we are not in an extinction that's going to probably take out at least 80 or 90% of humanity, if not all of us, then we're going to put off this. We're going to ignore this. We're going to procrastinate it. Assisting plants, especially trees, in migrating poleward. Again, we're not going to do this if we think that industrial civilization can be saved and the electricity is going to stay on indefinitely. And we're not going to invest the time, energy, and resources in all things regenerative and learning from and supporting indigenous resistance and wisdom if we think industrialism, if we still are enthralled by the secular religion of perpetual progress. If we realize that indigenuity is the only thing that's ever been sustainable, that is having a love relationship, a respectful, reciprocal relationship with the body of life. If we don't realize that, if we think that we're still on some trajectory of progress, then we're not going to attend to these things, which is why I'm so passionate about dealing with opium addiction. The stability of the biosphere has been in decline for centuries and an unstoppable collapse for decades. This is a fact. This is not a belief. This great acceleration of technology and market-driven ecocide is an easily verifiable fact. The scientific evidence is overwhelming. Evidence is also compelling that the vast majority of people will deny this, especially those still benefiting from the existing order, those legitimately concerned about the consequences of collapse, and those who fear that accepting reality means giving up. And the fact that most of us are in that paragraph is the reason most people don't know about the first paragraph. The history of 80 or more previous boom and bust, progress, regress societies clearly reveals how and why Homo colossus, that is industrial humanity, is destined for near-term extinction. And that may or may not mean the extinction of Homo sapiens. We just don't know. Paradoxically, collapse acceptance and collapse trust may be the only thing that can help us not make a bad situation worse, such as not attending to the nuclear issue, as well as to help us live fully, fearlessly, and meaningfully, even at Teotihuacan, that is the end of the world as we know it. One of the most profound historians of the 20th century famously said that when a civilization is in decline, optimism is cowardice. And Cyril Connolly said something similar: optimism and self-pity are the positive and negative poles of modern cowardice. And I love it. Kate Marvel's a climate scientist. She said, we need courage, not hope, to face climate change. Courage is the resolve to do well without the assurance of a happy ending. So here are 6 truths that most people don't know, and they are absolutely repulsive, which is why you will notice in your own belly, in your own heart, in your own soul, a desire to negate or deny these 6 things. I can almost guarantee it. We all do. First is that all human-centered civilizations destroy their habitat and then self-destruct. All of them have. We have no counterexamples in human history. We have over 100 examples. Technology and the market can't save us from the ecocide they always create. I do a whole program where I go deep into this. Every money-based economy that treats the living world as merely resources and a place for waste has always committed ecocide, because they don't relate to the living world as a greater thou. They think of it as a lesser it. Climate change is not our main predicament. Ecological overshoot is. I did quite a bit on that last month. But most people think, well, if we just reduce carbon emissions, no, climate change is one of half a dozen things that are all pretty much extinction level, or at least potentially, certainly functional extinction. That is 90% or more of us. We are decades into abrupt climate mayhem, unstoppable collapse, and a mass extinction that will likely include most plants, animals, and humans. And here's the especially repulsive part: likely by 2040. Could be sooner, might be later, could be 2030, could be 2050, but it's not going to be much further than that. And denying the above increases the likelihood, inevitability, of scores, possibly hundreds, of nuclear meltdowns in the next decade or two. And most people will deny all this as long as possible, and will suffer accordingly. These are repulsive. These are unacceptable. These are disgusting. And unfortunately, they're true, which is why I'm so passionate about this stuff. So Hopium Detox, my best 12,000 hours, 9 years of research, I compressed into one long video. This one here, it's the all-you-can-eat version. I've created 2 shorter versions, but it's 2 hours and it's 6 20-minute servings. And I just mention that because any of you who watch this video again, I'm mentioning a few resources that you can go deeper if you're led to do so, because it's accepting these 10 inevitabilities that brings about the peace that passes understanding and joy, and truly grounding yourself in post-doom. So just very quickly, I'm not going to talk about these. I'll just mention them. These are 10 things that if we deny them, we're going to suffer. And if we accept them, we can truly live joyously, even in the midst of collapse and potential relatively near-term human extinction. Most people will have a hard time trusting how and why our civilization is collapsing. So don't try to get everybody to understand this stuff. Abrupt climate mayhem, that's like 10,000 years of climate change in half a human lifetime, rapid 2 degrees Celsius or more, locks in biospheric collapse and extinctions. And we're already there, or just about there. Tipping points already crossed will be falsely framed as still avoidable. Without assisted migration, love and action, most tree species will go extinct. Without urgent collective action, there will be dozens of nuclear meltdowns. As our biospheric and societal predicament worsens, so will our mental health. Now, that doesn't mean individuals. It's possible to have great mental health. Accepting is the biggest part of it. But if we deny it especially, we will see collectively, as a society, as a civilization, we will see an increase of addictions and an increase. We're in the early stages of the greatest mental health crisis and the greatest addiction crisis in human history. And even Plato noted that as civilizations collapse, addictions and mental health issues of all kinds ramp up. Most people will only reluctantly relinquish their faith in the almighty we. We can do it if we just all do this. If you proselytize only the doom side of reality, collapse reality, expect to be shunned. Most people will crave distraction and virtually anything that offers hope. And where there are addicts, there will be dealers. Elite universities, the IPCC, the mainstream media, New York Times bestselling authors, politicians will remain first-rate legal opium dealers. So I mentioned this before, I'm just going to do it quickly again. A comforting vision of the future that requires breaking the laws of physics, biology, or ecology. Addiction to false, that is literally impossible hopes. Irrational or unwarranted optimism that promises short-term relief, but delivers crushing disappointment and despair when reality inevitably bites. Any hope that leads us to put off or not prioritize what matters most individually and collectively. And believing that the climate crisis can be fixed or solved by doubling down on the very things causing ecocide. Here's some examples. Believing that enough people can become climate aware in time to transform society and save Homo colossus. Believing that there's still plenty of time to figure out how to safely, permanently store spent nuclear fuel rods. Believing that human cleverness, technology, or the market can halt the ecocide that they always inevitably create. Believing that we can stop or reverse abrupt climate mayhem or biospheric and societal collapse. And believing that things can or will return to normal, unaware that normal is precisely why we are in this mess in the first place. We are so, The most vulnerable are young people who expect a life like their parents or grandparents had. High schoolers agonizing over whether college and college debt is worth it. Couples trying to decide on marriage or whether to become parents. Parents of young children and teenagers still living at home. Older generations who are terrified or consumed with guilt when considering the world their adult children and grandchildren will inherit. And then the more abstract ones, any and all who lack an ecological understanding of history. Those who are unwilling or unable to trust reality as it really is, and devout believers in the secular religion of everlasting human progress. This is the basic belief that most of us grew up with in the 20th century. We can science our way out of anything. And I just encountered this incredible brother. I mean, it's like I was as excited about his book as I am about Matt Fox now. This book just came out like a week ago or 2 weeks ago. When Time is Short, Finding Our Way in the Anthropocene by Timothy Beale, who's a religion and ecology scholar. He says, with faith, trust, and compassion, acclaimed religion scholar Timothy Beale shows how to navigate the inevitabilities of the climate crisis and the very real and very near possibility of human extinction. What if it's too late to save ourselves from the climate crisis? When Time is Short is a meditation on our finite human future that asks how we got here to help us imagine a different relationship to the natural world. And I would say a different relationship to God. I was like 12 pages into this book, and I immediately called him up, and we ended up having about an hour and a half long conversation just 2 days ago. So here's the heart of what I really want to cover this week, which is how does our understanding, I mean, one of the things that I love about this group is that most of us, if not all of us, are grounded in the epic of evolution, the universe story, big history. We're grounded in this billions year long creation story that God, reality, has been revealing through facts and through the whole worldwide global scientific community, evidence. You know, some of you know, I like to speak of evidence as modern day scripture. Evidence is the main way reality is revealing itself to us. And so what have we learned also, not just in terms of, you know, the big scary stuff, but what have we learned from previous collapsing times about how to live joyously and meaningfully and courageously in the midst of, without in any way denying, without taking secret hits on the opium pipe. So living meaningfully and courageously. The first is to learn and feel together. Don't do it alone. Learn about post-doom, learn about deep adaptation together, and feel the stages of grief, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance with others. Find strength and support in community. This is absolutely vital. Those who don't have gallows humor and those that don't have a community to discuss this stuff with and cry with and celebrate with are the ones that are most likely to be depressed the longest and commit suicide. Love and action. Relinquish human-centeredness and honor the living world as thou. Whether you use Gaia or God as I do with an earth emoji or whatever, but honor the living world as what it really is our material, biophysical creator, sustainer, and end. Thomas Berry's work is grounded deeply in this understanding. Grow in integrity, that is right relationship to reality, and fall in love with a place or a species and protect, foster, and defend it as much as you possibly can. We all can make a difference just because we can't save everything. And even if we go extinct in the next 20 years, there's lots that we can do that can actually carry forth and help other species, even if it's just building topsoil in your backyard. Teddy Goldsmith is one of my mentors, up there with Thomas Berry and William Catton. He wrote The Way, an ecological worldview. It's just profound. I've recorded many of the best introductions to it. And he says, it's an astonishing thought that we can completely destroy this planet, make it uninhabitable, and ensure the extinction of our species and countless others without violating a single law. It's because for over 200 years, the playing field has been tipped to where now we can do all kinds of damage, societies, corporations, whatever, without breaking a law. So what does prophetic or redemptive love and action mean? It's not just immoral. It is evil to irreparably harm the future for short-term personal or institutional gain. Yet we have a global economic system supported by governments on every continent and accepted by adherents of every faith, ensuring that it's not only legal to betray posterity, it's profitable, highly profitable. So how do we live? What do we do? And how should we confront what is anti-future and thus evil? In other words, how do we protest and nonviolently, lovingly resist modern day structural, organizational, and institutional, that is legal evil? And why would we do it even if we thought we were going to go extinct in the next 20 years? Why bother? Well, Mahatma Gandhi was all about doing anything he could to challenge in a loving, nonviolent way, structural injustice, legal evil. Martin Luther King, same thing. And so it helps to understand what it is too late and what it's not too late for, because all of us can be engaged in action. We don't have to be a Martin Luther King Jr. or Gandhi. I mean, they didn't have any understanding that even at that time of their lives, society was wrecking the living world. They didn't know that. So let's be clear on what it is too late and what it's not too late for, because this is vital to guide our actions. It is too late to turn it around. It is too late to save Homo colossus, where each of us in the industrial world uses 20 to 30 or 20 to 50 times the resources and exudes 20 to 50 times the waste of normal Homo sapiens. It's too late to win the blame game. We can drop the blame. The self-righteous judgment of the oil companies or that other political party or this or that or the boomers. You know, if you're a young person, that's the big thing now. Blame the boomers. It's too late to win the blame game. It's too late to reverse global warming. It's too late to avoid reaping what we've sown. For thousands of years, we've been sowing this. It's not any generation's fault. It's too late to slow or stop the sixth great mass extinction. It's too late to avoid a population bottleneck, that is a die-off of not just humans, but most mammals and many vertebrates due to overshoot. It's too late to prevent a blue ocean event, that's BOE, blue ocean event, a massive methane release from the permafrost and a conflagration that is the great burning of the forests of the world. This is the thing. I mean, when I talk about the possibility of humans going extinct in the next 20 years, this is what's driving it. It's the permafrost that's already in runaway mode. It's the burning of the forests in the world that are already in runaway mode. And it's the shrinking of the ice all over the world, especially in the Arctic, that adds so much more heat to the dark blue ocean instead of the reflective whiteness of the ice. And all of those are totally unstoppable at this point. There's no techno fix. There's no change in consciousness. There's nothing that can stop that. It's runaway mode. It's too late for a significant evolution of consciousness to transform the world. And I know this is painful for those of us that have been committed to this kind of stuff for decades. And it's too late to spare us from the consequences of literally millennia, 6 to 8 millennia of human-centeredness, rather than life-centeredness or God-centeredness, G Earth emoji. It is not too late to do anything and everything we possibly can to promote, support, encourage further ecological integrity, social coherence, and personal wholeness. Every healthy society has attended to those three things, usually in that order, prioritizing ecological integrity, then social coherence, then personal wholeness. And so that's not too late. And there are millions of things that can be done, small things, large things, things we can do individually, things we can do together that further or support or encourage or nurture ecological integrity, social coherence, and personal wholeness. It's not too late to limit or to do everything we can to limit the deadliest toxicity. It's not too late to assist trees and other plants in migrating. In the past, the costs of denial were minimal. Given the nature of toxicity in trees, however, the consequences of denial now will last millions of years. That's why I'm so passionate about hopium addiction and recovery. My wife, as many of you know, is one of the world's leading, certainly North America's leading activists in terms of assisting trees in migrating faster than any other animal can move their seeds. In fact, this is the book that was written that features her throughout the whole book that just came out. Top publisher, W.W. Norton. So it's not too late to do any of that. It's not too late to not just do regenerative things, but to be regenerative in how we speak, how we live. That's the thing. I mean, there's so much good that we can do. It's not just a matter, I mean, when you realize that humans could go extinct in the next 20 years and we can't save industrialism, some people think, well, then why bother, eating lower on the food chain? Why bother not flying? Why bother not driving? Why bother all this stuff? Because we have to look ourselves in the mirror and feel good. It's not about the, sort of virtue signaling. It's not about being more holy than thou, more ecologically saint-like than thou. It's about doing the right thing for its own causes. And if you're a grandparent and your grandchild lives on the other side of the world or the other side of the continent, fly and do not feel guilty about it. Regenerative agriculture, permaculture, indigenuity, regenerative everything is partnering with the soil, protecting it. It's promoting diversity. It's holistic. It's the opposite of industrial ways of being with the land. And these, I'm mentioning this so that when those of you that want to come back to this video later, these are 4 post-doom conversations I've had with 4 amazing, absolutely stunning leaders in the field of regeneration and permaculture. I love this quote from Paul Hawken. He says, there's a rabbinical teaching that says, if you've told the world is ending and the Messiah has arrived, first plant a tree, then see if the story is true. building topsoil and planting trees while nurturing community is perhaps the most holy work that we can be engaged in. So it's not too late to any of that, and to become more resilient. Again, it's not becoming perfectly resilient. If the whole thing goes to shit in the next, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years, you're going to die along with everybody else, but you'll be able to be a blessing to your neighbors in the process. That's why one of the reasons why I only have 3 months worth of extra food, like if I can't go to the grocery store, and I would never own a gun. I'd rather die with my neighbors than protect my stuff from my neighbors. It's not too late to love something, learn something, let go of something, laugh at something, and pass something forward. We can all do that. These are the 5 L's. Loving something more than just humans. Love something alive, something green, and love people. Learn something. We can all learn things. And it's a time to learn that. And that goes along with legacy. We can pass on what we've already learned. Let go of something. We can all let go of, and John Michael Greer calls it LESS, less energy, less stuff, less stimulation. And laughing at something. It's so vital to nurture gallows humor. It's not too late to be a kind and loving person. It's not too late to salvage something rather than nothing. And it's certainly not too late to live life fully and love the life you live, even at Tiotawaki. So relinquish, I mentioned LESS. John Michael Greer has LESS, less energy, less stuff, less stimulation. And I now have added a further S, you can call it less with a lisp. We can all be committed to less energy, less stuff, less stimulation, and reducing the suffering in our spheres of influence, in our spheres of involvement. And completing your life and your legacy, that is attending to what matters most. And this is something that most people innately do once they give up the fight, when they've learned that they have a terminal condition. Some people go into fight mode and they fight until the week before they're dead. But those who don't do that, which is kind of dumb, but also human, it's pretty normal that a lot of people do that. But once people genuinely accept that they are in fact going to die in the not too distant future, most people attend to what matters most, expressing gratitude to the people that have been a blessing in your life, writing letters, picking up the phone, expressing regret to the people that you've harmed or hurt or betrayed or you were out of integrity with or in some way had some negative impact. And you can do that with people that you haven't even talked to in 40 years. You will blow their freaking socks off by doing that. I know, because I did it when I had cancer. And 2 people, all I could say was, I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to know that I know what a shit I was. And if I could go back and do it differently, I'd do it. And we both were in tears. And expressing care. We can all express care. I've actually created, once when COVID happened, I actually created a long list of people who I just care about. And I've been reaching out periodically and just mentioning, hey, been thinking about you in these crazy times. I don't want to take anything for granted. And especially now that God only knows we could have a nuclear war or, global famine or who knows. So I just want to let you know I care about you. And if this is the last time we talk, I just want to know that you were precious in my life or whatever you're led to say. But these are the things that give life its deepest meaning. So living life fully and loving the life you live, even at Tiotawaki. Here are some things that I've collated that are drawn various spiritual traditions and various understandings of past civilizational collapse and that sort of thing. Expect breakdown and unpleasant surprise. If you expect breakdowns and unpleasant surprises, then when they actually show up on your doorstep, like when somebody like Donald Trump gets elected, you don't go, well, this shouldn't happen. You understand that this is the kind of thing that can be expected in collapse. It's like, oh, right, of course. Doesn't mean you don't do everything you can to fight for the people that you want in office. Absolutely. But if you expect things that worked a year ago, a decade ago, or longer, expect that some of those things are not going to work anymore. I just hit my microphone. Can you all still hear me? Somebody say yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you, Michael.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks. I've realized from experience that this microphone, sometimes if I accidentally just touch it, it goes out. And I've been on one program where nobody told me for like 5 minutes. Like, guys. So expect breakdowns and unpleasant surprises. Manage your meds. And what I mean by that is we've all developed coping skills or coping tools, coping strategies that most of the time we developed when we were teenagers to deal with depressing things, things that angered us, things that terrified us, whatever. And some of those are healthy and some of those aren't. And so manage your meds. And if you can't, let God, let Gaia, let life do it. You know, that's the whole 12-step thing, but it doesn't have to be 12-step. But basically, let whatever your name is for your biophysical creator, sustainer, and end. Again, think nesting dolls. Whatever your name is for the larger nested realities and the smaller nested realities that make you up, turn it over to them, to that reality. You can actually have some victory where you can't if you're trying to do it just yourself. Renounce blaming and practice making life right. Like a muscle, to practice making life right. That's a secular way of saying faith in God. It's trusting reality. It's accepting what's so. It's cherishing what is rather than what we wish was the case. It takes practice, but you can actually develop, you can become buff. It's exercising your prefrontal cortex. But if you renounce, if you just make a commitment, you will not blame anymore for the rest of your life. It's going to take a while for it to become habit, but you can do it. I know many people who have. So practice trusting reality, making life right. That is, however reality shows up, find a way to breathe with it. Okay, here's what's real. Now, what's possible? And then live out of that place of possibility. Redeem what you can and accept the rest. And I use the word redeem. I know it's a religious word, but we can find ways to redeem aspects of our own past, our own history, our own habits, our own addictions, our own patterns. But we can also redeem relationships. To redeem a relationship is usually not, I mean, it's not this simple, but it's usually not far from this. The ability to anybody that you used to be close to, and now you're not. Communicate to them in a way that you give them credit for everything that did or does work in the relationship. You take full responsibility for everything that didn't and doesn't work in the relationship, and then shut up and watch what happens. It can be miraculous. So redeem any relationships you can. It's usually just by taking responsibility for things you never took responsibility for before. You were always blaming them. Be gentle and forgiving with yourself. Start there and with others. That's why, you know, if you've been beating yourself because you still eat meat, if you've been beating yourself because you still drive more than you want to, or you fly more than you want to, or whatever it may be, just be gentle and forgiving with yourself and with others. Live and love as if this were your last year. It may not be. You may have another 5 years, 10 years, or more. But live and love as if this were your last year. That's a powerful spiritual exercise. Most spiritual traditions talk about having your own mortality, the awareness of your own mortality as an advisor on one of your shoulders. And this is a great book, Stephen Levine, How to Live This Year as If It Were Your Last. You may or may not share his Buddhist metaphysics. It doesn't matter. There's great stuff in that book. Live and love as if it were your last year. And that is also a body and mind truth, you know. And then cultivate a habit of compassionate generosity. This is an interesting, and it will feed your soul and bless everybody you're in relationship with. Because as Albert Einstein said, I love this quote, a human is part of the whole called by us universe, a part limited in time and space. We experience ourselves, our thoughts and feelings as something separated from the rest, a sort of optical delusion of our consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us and our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest to us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. And I just created this slide for another program, and I want to share it because I find that everybody, in my opinion, is deserving of compassion and generosity. But I think these are populations that are especially deserving of compassion and generosity. Poor people, communities, and nations who will suffer the most from climate and ecological breakdowns, yet contributed least to the causes. Those of us feeling the loneliness of having to navigate our own downshifting expectations, whilst family, friends, and maybe even spouses are in denial. Loved ones dying in COVID-19 isolation, and all beings who will suffer from the social, political, economic, and ecological collapse of industrial civilization. Techno-optimists and free market fundamentalists who will remain in the denial the longest and yet be hardest hit emotionally and financially when reality bites. Religious, political, and social liberals and progressives whose faith in the religion of perpetual progress is currently being shaken, shattered, or abandoned. And I suspect that's most of us on this call. But I believe these people also are deserving of compassion and generosity. Religious conservatives and evangelicals whose faith in the Bible has blinded them to what reality God has evidentially revealed about our inner, outer, social, and mortal nature, and thus who struggle disproportionately with addiction, teen pregnancy, domestic violence, depression, suicide, and sin in general. And then finally, take 100% responsibility for your life. One of the most influential chapters of any book that I've ever read in my life is Jack Canfield's Success Principles. The very first chapter of the book is called Take 100% Responsibility for Your Life. My son was an internet gaming addict at the age of 21. He read that chapter and it totally changed his life. The son that just is arriving right now is one of the most stellar human beings I've ever known, certainly young people. And he credits the first chapter of Jack Canfield as the major turning point in his life. You don't need to do everything. Do what calls your heart. Effective action comes from love. It is unstoppable and it is enough. So actually, before I go into anything else, I want to just stop here and come to, because this was the original thing that I put out as or just saying what this was about, this big picture. So I want to come to these questions that you also asked. So no one needs convincing that creation is in crisis. Even those with no understanding of the unstoppable nature of biospheric and civilizational collapse feel the stress. Just to read or watch the propaganda formerly known as the news these days is a sobering or unsobering experience. How do we cope? How can we stay inspired? And perhaps most importantly, how can we be a blessing to others who are confused, angry, depressed, or filled with fear, guilt, blame, regret, or grief? And yeah, that's going to be most people we know. What elements of eco-mysticism are most vital, and which aspects of the great story most relevant for staying sane, grateful, and on purpose in these most challenging of times? And what special tools and gifts do those of us grounded in the epic of evolution and creation spirituality have to offer? And that's really what I want to have as much of our conversation as possible on, is the most relevant aspects of eco-mysticism in the great story. In other words, what are the most especially empowering insights from creation spirituality and the epic of evolution? How can we stay positive and inspiring even at Teotihuacan? And what gifts can we offer to our communities, the world, and to the future? So here were the questions that were posed to me. I'll respond to these without using any slides, just based on what I've already shared. And then we'll just open it up and perhaps spend the rest of our time just in dialogue, or if there's space, I've got a few more slides that I'll share, but I want to first just take as much time to do this as possible. So the questions. There was some resistance to your word hopium. For some, that which you call courageous love in action is what they would call hope, as in Joanna Macy's active hope. Could you expand on your understanding of hope as you use it in the word hopium? So I hope that what I've covered covers some of that, but basically the biggest thing about hopium is believing for the impossible. It's not, I'm not speaking about whatever gives you hope on a day-by-day basis. But for you to truly have the peace that passes understanding, the joy that is possible to have even in the midst of devastating collapse, you have to accept the worst. Oops, hold on a second here. Have to accept the possibility of extinction in the not too far, in the not too distant, because if we don't, it has power over us. If we think we can stop civilizational collapse, if we think that we can do anything that we decide to do, and if we just get enough people to vote the right way or whatever, if we believe that that's the case, then that's going to basically taint us. So even Joanna Macy rewrote some of the stuff in the latest version of Act of Hope. And we've had an amazing conversation. I'll say more about that here in a minute, because I want to point to 4 of the post-doom conversations that I would recommend most, go to first if you haven't already seen them. So how do you see us moving through the emotional field of depression over the news that you presented to the positivity of clarity, compassion, and courageous love in action? Well, the first thing I would say, drawing on Robin Wall Kimmerer, who's the Native American plant scientist and an indigenous elder, she says, we don't have to wait to get saved or enlightened. In the process of doing something pro-future, in the process of doing anything kind and generous to others or to other creatures, doing anything at all to promote ecological integrity, social coherence, and personal wholeness, we are deeply nurtured by those. So simply to look for people who have it worse than you and do something, or to take some plant and get some seeds and move it further north. Those are the kinds of things that are, it's almost like an inoculation. It's almost like a vaccine in the best sense for depression and for overwhelm and despair. Many of us were struck by your comment about your granddaughter's life being much shorter than yours. You say you accept her shorter life, but do you joyfully accept how her life will end? My response to that is that most of humanity, for most of human history, we didn't have the assumption that we would all live decades into our old age. That's so recent. That really comes only with electricity. But what we didn't know was that electricity also is the single worst thing for the biosphere. If you look at a scale of the electrification of the planet and the scale of devastation of everything we depend upon, the two are in lockstep. And so most human history, you knew that if you had a bad winter, if you had a drought, if you had a famine, you and your loved ones could die. And that happened. Connie and I visit graveyards all the time. We've visited hundreds of graveyards in the last 19 years of traveling North America, and we've got one close by here that we walk to once or twice a week. And we do that in part, and I like to look at gravestones because it doesn't take too much reading of the gravestones to realize that it wasn't long ago that a lot of women died in childbirth and a lot of kids under the age of 5 died. And so whether my granddaughter lives to the age of 5 or 10 or 15 or 20, and I would actually put it at probably a less than 5% chance that she'll live beyond 20. That doesn't mean she can't have an enormously beneficial quality of life. And the biggest part is to not toxify young people with all of our fear, our guilt, our judgment, all that stuff. Kids are just present to reality. And so I'm not going to, I have an almost 12-year-old granddaughter. We've been sharing some of this kind of stuff with, but not most of it. And my daughter, who's 32, the mother of our 2-year-old granddaughter, she knows about this in general, and we've talked about it and all, but I don't ever dump this stuff on her. She needs to stay present to being the best mom possible for as long as possible and not worry about the rest. And so whether my granddaughter lives to be the age of 8 or 18, I'm going to do everything I possibly can to ensure that she has as much love, as much trust, as much joy as possible. And I know from experience in previous collapsing times that for her to have at least enough awareness, which is we are in contraction, we are in collapse, we're in decline, we're not in rise, we're not in progress, we're in regress. Simply that, if all she knows is that, and knows that every season things are going to get a little worse. Every year, things are going to get a little worse, a little more difficult, and things will break down. Things that worked a decade ago aren't working now. People that you could count on a decade ago, you can't count on now. If she understands that, as she becomes aware, not when she's a kid, then she simply looks for people who are suffering and then looks to be a blessing to them. And that will give her so much joy. And I don't know how her life will end. Probably for most of us, we'll probably either starve or there'll be violence, or most likely starvation. It turns out starvation and diseases from being malnourished are the two ways that population crashes most. And I suspect that's probably true for most of the people that I love, including my granddaughter. Several people have wondered how you regard the non-material energies that move about the biosphere, like the human spirit, divine powers, quantum fields, the power of love, and the creativity of the young. What if your clarity, compassion, and courage actually create an energy wave so large that it alters your predicted course? First of all, I don't have a predicted course. I don't know. I've embraced the worst possible case scenario. The same thing as I did when I had cancer 13 years ago. I embraced the very real possibility I could die in the next 8 months. And I truly accepted that. And that way, death and the thought of death had there was no fear. I was able to live fearlessly, but not desperately. I wasn't trying to do everything to keep myself alive. Yes, I was taking responsibility for holistic stuff as much as I could do. And I trusted the chemotherapy, but I didn't know. And I've accepted the possibility that I and everybody I know and love could die this decade. Do I hope that happens? No. Do I predict it happens? No. But I think that's quite likely. I would put it well over 80% that there will be 500 million people at most by 2040, and quite possibly nobody, including most of the people I know. None of us are indigenous. My family's not indigenous. We don't know how to grow food a little bit, not enough to keep us alive. So the paradox is accepting the possibility of worst allows me to live life fully and love the life I live. And I do not, this is just me. Feel free to reject this, please. You'll have my blessing if you do. But I do not hold out hope for any magic, any supernatural, any mystical or woo-woo or anything. I realized I tainted it by using that word. But what happens at the quantum level happens at the quantum level. It doesn't happen at the scale of basketballs. That's why that movie, What the Bleep Do We Know, was so goofy. It doesn't happen at that scale. And so I personally don't hold out any hope for divine powers, human spirit, quantum fields, the power of love, or the creativity of the young, because I've studied dozens and dozens of previous collapsed civilizations, and most people stay in denial, and a lot of people believe that things can be transformed if you just have the right beliefs, if you just this right, and it never happens. It can't happen. It's hopium. It requires breaking the laws of physics, biology, or ecology. So that's my response to that, and feel free to reject it. So I want to share this, but I actually want to stop because this is so profound, and you can actually Google it. So if we don't have time to get to this, we can get to it. But Paul Chafurka's 5 Stages of Awakening is absolutely priceless. But again, I can just make sure that you've got the link and you can find it on your own. So I'm going to stop sharing. And yeah, let's just let's take our I can't multitask. So please, if there's anything in the chat that's directed at me, I'm going to count on, Gail, Penny, or Bob to sort of let me become aware of that. So
Michael, I think I'll take you off spotlight so that we can see if
Great.
he raises hands. And
that's great.
Damien, yes.
You got to take yourself off mute, Damien.
Thank you. Michael, I just want to say briefly, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, and for a lot of people for bringing reality to us, even though it's very hard, and for bringing reality to us, but in such a compassionate way. I just want to give you my thanks and blessings.
Thank you so much.
I see Frank Palicki.
Oh, yeah, they all should be here.
Any questions, comments? It doesn't have to be a question. You can just share your heart, share your feelings,
Oh, yeah,
as
there
Damien
it
just
is.
did.
You have to mute.
Okay.
Mark Steiner, go for it.
Yeah, I was just thinking about from the almost the final parts of your comments there, Michael, and speaking about your daughter and her need to focus on being the best mom she can. And that rubbing up against the need for us to be living in the reality that we're living in, right? And so as I think about the importance of this information and the need to share it, I feel the contradiction there, right? Of like, it's already a great concern of sharing this with people that say have young children, um, and and having great doubt about my society or my culture's capacity to hold this reality and to respond to this news in a way that will actually make life better, right? If while I might be working my ass off to reduce suffering, I think that in living in this reality will cause some people to live out ways that will be very unhealthy and dangerous. So I'm aware of those contradictions, right? As I try to figure out what to do with this information, both personally and as someone who is a member of community.
Yeah, that's great, Mark. Well, um, you are one of the people that I admire and respect and most in the universe story, creation spirituality, epic of evolution movement. And I'm not evangelistic about post-doom. I'm always planting seeds, and I'm always very unashamed and clear about a post-doom perspective, but I really focus on the benefits of genuine, not just collapse and near-term human extinction possibility, not just being aware of that, but accepting that and then trusting that. I find that distinction between collapse awareness, collapse acceptance, collapse trust, but where somebody else is at and what they can handle. I mean, it took me a couple of years before I could really get to the place of true trust, where I could get to the place I had gallows humor. I didn't have that for the first 2 years that I started studying this stuff. And we may not have time for people to spend 2 years in depression or despair or anger or blame or judgment or whatever. And so I am always planting seeds with whoever I'm with. I'm honest, but I'm honest just in little bits. I want to see if they lean toward me wanting more information, or if non-verbally or consciously or unconsciously, they're like, I don't want to hear no more. And if they're in that, man, I don't go nowhere more with them. Because I think we have to respect that people are ready when they're ready. And if I've got a child who's struggling with addiction, or children living at home, or if I'm living in my parents' home, or I've got, there's so many personal issues, people's jobs, people's food, people's savings, people's, whether they're dealing with wildfire or drought. I mean, there's so many innumerable differences that there's just no way to generalize. Should we tell people? Should we not? What should we say? It's a case by case. So that having at least a few people, or more than a few, that you can talk to and share your hearts about this stuff is really a collective discernment. It's sort of collective intelligence at that discerning of what to share, how much to share, and what not to share. So I'm very honest with even my youngest daughter, but I'm honest in little ways. I never hold back anything, but I definitely am respectful of the fact that she needs to focus and be the best mom possible. And she can't do that if she's freaking terrified. Roxanne.
Thanks, Michael. Like I said, I've been very much focused on what you said last month, and it's really been echoing what's been working itself in my unconscious in the last year and a half. I think that the pandemic really set me on this trajectory of understanding this. And so the question that I'm asking in my own devotional life is how, where, when in my own spheres of influence am I to start sharing this? And so thank you, number one, for bringing out into the world a vital and difficult process that was happening on the inside of my world. And then I would like to be able to use some of your slides and materials to craft something that would be in my voice, that would be that I could start using with people where I live, to form a community of, you know, post-doom people that will get together and grieve together. And so I visited the post-doom website a little bit. I might be frozen. So is some of that material available?
Yes. Wow. Roxanne, thank you. What a gift that you just gave me, because I'd been wanting to do it anyway. I've had the thought several times, you know, there's just no reason I can't put virtually all of my slides, all the important slides that I do in any of my programs. I can put them into one Dropbox folder and then have that folder accessible on the discussion page of the Post-Doom website, maybe the resources page also, like just make it easily available, so that anybody who wants to take any slides they want, they're welcome to do it. And what I encourage folks to do is to own it as your own. You don't have to quote Michael Dowd, or, you know, I mean, I think I told the story last time of a pastor who basically said at the beginning of the sermon, you know, I'm indebted to my friendship to Michael Dowd and Connie Barlow for the inspiration of the sermon. And then he preached a sermon and 80% of the words were my words. And I loved it. It's not plagiarism. It's like my joy. So yes, you may use my slides, and I will, maybe not today, but by tomorrow. Yeah, I want to actually go through and test it. So in the next few days, I will communicate with Penny and with Bob, and just absolutely, I will do that. I've been meaning to do that anyway. In fact, the last email communication I had with Gail, I mentioned that or not the last email, but a previous one. So anyway, I will send to the three of them and they can let you all know, but those slides will be available soon.
It just really helped me to sort through what's your voice, see how it echoes in my voice.
Yes, no, exactly.
And from that place, and for any of those ministers out there, that one of the lectionary readings for this Sunday is the quote about things hoped for. And so it's a wonderful opportunity if you want to take one opportunity, you know, one little put your toe in the water and say, you know, now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, and begin a conversation about hope, challenging, you know, false assumptions. So.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I just want to say this now, but I'll also say it on whatever notice I put on the website, is that you now have my permission to not necessarily quote me, just, you know, but also to edit, to make any changes so that it speaks in your voice. Yeah. Ken, go for it.
Hey, we could have a long conversation. I'm going to focus on one item, and if this is too much of a rabbit hole, you let me know.
Okay.
I discovered some years ago a process for turning human bodies into compost when we're done with them. It's sort of our last gift to the earth. And company in Seattle called Recompose has sort of pioneered that. There's another company called Earth. And it's now legal to do this kind of process in Washington State, Oregon, Colorado, and now Vermont. And it's up in the assembly of the California legislature. Well, the more we're aware of the large-scale collapses unfolding, we realize that this process, which takes about 6 months, ain't gonna cut it for the volume of folks that are going to be expiring. I mean, let alone the boomer generation ending naturally. So I've written to the one, and I'll write to the other about what thoughts they have about scaling this way up as a way of being kind to the earth as our last act. Any thoughts?
Well, first of all, I think it's great. Connie and I have actually visited several natural burial sort of places, and this idea of, you know, compost, I'm familiar with that process. It's great. And yeah, it would need to be scaled up. But there is one other thing that we can do and you could call it our last great gift. And it's something that I didn't touch on at all in this program, but we're going into it rather deeply. Every 10 days between now and the equinox, we have like this coming Saturday, for example, at 1 o'clock, and then 10 days later, that Wednesday at 7 o'clock. So every 10 days between now and the equinox, we're having an 8-part series on post-doom, no gloom approaches to death, dying, and sacred endings. And one of the things that we can always do is we can die gracefully. We can die with integrity, with generosity, with compassion. And how we die sets an example for whoever remains beyond us, even if that's only another few years themselves. So there's much that we can do as a gift in terms of how we approach our own mortality, how we think about our species' mortality, and how we die. But yes, that doesn't necessarily address what you're talking about, but what you're talking about is great. But I kind of see it kind of like choosing not to fly or choosing not to eat meat or whatever. It's like it nourishes us deeply, and it's, it does make a difference on some really small scale, but it's certainly not going to transform things. But I think it sounds holy to me. Go for it. Carol.
Oh, someone else is done.
Oh, Carol is going to
I know her.
be spoken for by Paul.
Okay, go for it, Paul.
Hi, Michael. Good to see you after all these
Good
years.
to see you too.
Michael, I really agree with.
So somebody, wait. So hold on. Somebody's talking. You're not on mute. So somebody's not on mute.
It's a
And
couple. It's a couple. 2 people and there's 2 of you on, and you're the ones who have your.
so if everybody could just mute themselves other than who's speaking, that would be.
Paul, it's a little difficult to hear you. Is it possible to get closer to the?
Closer to the computer. Okay.
Okay, great. Thanks.
So, Michael, I'll repeat in case I wasn't picked up. I really respect your need to tell us about hopium, and that we don't stay lost in that place of unsubstantiated wishfulness. However, I did a lot of my volunteer work, and even as a chaplain for a while with hospicing. And so when you went into the old Kubler-Ross taxonomy of grief, it was resonating with me. I used to work in a chemo clinic where people were often told by a particularly blunt physician that they had 6 months to live or 3 months to live. And I never saw that as very helpful. I found that it was good to help people put their affairs in order. And I think that's what you are helping the planet do with your bluntness. However, when you are told you're going to die, it sets a whole new mechanism going, and I'm not sure it's helpful. There's nothing wrong with a little denial. We need to start moving forward into anger and through the process. But I began to hear, as you were telling about your child and what you would or would not tell your daughter. And that I really respect, because I think you're accepting the different stages we all are in when it comes to accepting our death. I just wanted to throw that in there, and also to recommend a book that I haven't heard you mention, but that has been very helpful to me, which is called Hospicing Modernity. And it's written by a UBC professor. You may know of it already, being well read, Michael, but she is working a few of us through a process of gesturing towards decolonialized futures. And that has all the essence of hopefulness in it without being foolish and being totally realistic about the extinction that's coming. So that's from Paul, and it's really good.
Yeah, no, thank you, Paul. And I've listened to that book in the audio form. It's really quite extraordinary. Dugald Hein is where I learned it from it. But I found I couldn't get through it, in large part because there was, at least in my estimation, some things that were just really didn't accept the 10 things that I say are inevitable, and consequently I would say that my experience is that 85% of that book is fabulous. There's great stuff there, but the 15% of it that isn't, and by the way, that's better percentage than I give my own book. Thank God for evolution. I say only 80% of that is, and 20% is hopium. But yeah, but this idea of I do think that we are in a global hospice time, and that doesn't necessarily mean every human being is going to die. But it does mean that there's a tremendous collapse of population, a collapse of ecosystems, a collapse of species. And the only hope for anything, softening any kind of landing is along the lines of indigenuity, regeneration, all that good stuff. And so I'm a full-throated, big-hearted yes, amen to furthering all that as much as possible. But I do know that if at least if there's not a critical mass of people who accept that things are collapsing and it's unstoppable, then we will put off the nuclear stuff. We will put off helping other species pass through this bottleneck. And that's why I'm so passionate about at least enough people getting through hopium detox and recovery that we take those steps. It's kind of like we buy insurance and there's not probably more than a 3% chance that you're going to have a car accident in the next year. You got insurance, you got health insurance, all this stuff. Well, there's a way better than 20% chance that there will be severe power outages and wild events that are going to create nuclear accidents on a scale that could literally toxify things for millions and millions of years. And so if we stay in denial about that, that's the piece that really just breaks my heart. So
Thank you.
Pat?
Yes. Hi, Michael. I put this in the chat a little while ago, but I'm just going to read it.
Okay.
You say it's not too late to support Indigenous resistance. I appreciate that you counsel honoring and following the lead of cultures who have deep knowledge and wisdom. However, they didn't make this mess. We, white wealthy people, did. The Indigenous people I know want white people to mount our own resistance as well as support them. They do not want the full responsibility on their shoulders and see us as being able to do things with our wealth and power that are more dangerous for them. How do you respond to this?
Amen. Absolutely. 100% amen. No hesitation whatsoever. Again,
I'm curious why you don't say a little bit more about the resistance that we can be mounting, because I think it is possible to do.
Because I think it's way too beyond that. I mean, individuals and groups of individuals that are led in that direction. Wow, yes, that's great. But the world's forests all over the world are going to burn no matter if 7 billion people started doing resistance. The coral reefs are gone. The oceans are becoming actually deoxygenated as well as acidic. Most species on land and most species in the oceans will go extinct regardless of what resistance we do. So that's why I don't make as big a deal about it. But anybody that's led to do that, amen. It could definitely help certain species pass through. And it might even help certain communities of people pass through. But things are so far more gone than most activists and whether they're Indigenous or Western, are willing to grant. We're going to lose all the ice in the world. It's literally unstoppable. Yesterday, I talked with John Englander, who's the world's foremost experts on the oceans. He used to be the CEO of the Jacques Cousteau Society. And he's written a couple of amazing books that are untouchable. Nobody touches his books because they're unassailable from a science-based perspective. And if every human being woke up tomorrow morning committed to being an eco-saint, or if every human being died tonight in our sleep, the oceans would still rise 25 to 40 feet in the next 200 years, regardless of what we do. And that means a whole lot of toxicity if we don't move all that stuff away. So there's lots of stuff that we can do, but it's the stuff that's on a geological scale is not just resisting watersheds and mountains and mining and all that, because we are in such a, I want to use a word, demonic system that's been demonic for 7,000 years, 6,000 years. And so no resistance is going to stop that. It's one of the reasons why that what Indigenous people call wetiko the sickness of the mind and heart, which is anthropocentrism, it is human-centeredness, is so pervasive. It's one of the reasons why indigenous peoples have been taken over and decimated and genocide all over the world. It's horrible, it's evil, but no resistance is going to stop what's already unstoppable. Barbara, in my opinion, feel free to reject that.
This has been very interesting. I watched your earlier, I didn't get to attend last month, so I watched it earlier today, but three thoughts came up to my
A
mind.
double dose of Dowd on the same day? Oh, girl. Oh.
No doubt, thoughts. One, I hate when you start talking about the fact that we're in decline. I can remember in grade school being taught about the rise and fall of nations. And, you know, when you put the chart up showing the 88 civilizations that collapsed, that's pretty much, you know, what I was thinking about, that this was a natural progression of things. Secondly, in doing Bible studies for my master's degree, I explored the book of Isaiah, and I felt like Isaiah pretty much, the three sections of Isaiah each address this point in time where we go into a decline. So like in the first Isaiah, he's very critical of the king. And then in second Isaiah, he's talking about going into exile. And then third Isaiah is the return from exile. And by that time, they're very socially conscious of how they should act and things like that. So I was kind of noted that, well, now the Bible has recorded it too, this rise and fall of nations. And then I started thinking about indigenous people, and I was wondering if you thought maybe that indigenous people are actually the remnants of civilizations that collapsed, because they have a deep regard for nature. And that's really where we're trying to head people now. So that was my question.
Yeah, that's a great question, Barbara. Certainly that is true in some situations that we know. For example, the Mayan civilization collapsed, but there are still many Mayans, and most of them have sort of reintegrated into a more indigenous way of, living, thinking, feeling, acting, a more intimate, personal, respectful, reverential relationship with the living world. Stan Rushworth is an amazing indigenous elder. He's right up there with Robin Wall Kimmerer in terms of people I personally value and esteem as tremendous intellectual sort of mentors, heart ecological. He's been working closely with Dar Jamel. In fact, they just came out with a book together recently. And he talks about that, it's the human-centered folks that were cast out of the garden. Those who still maintain an earth-centered, a land-centered, those who still believe that we belong to the land, not those who believe that the land belongs to us. The people who believe the land belongs to us were cast out of the garden. That's most of us. But you could say that, speaking mythically, indigenous people, those who believe that we belong to the land, they're still in the garden, except that we now have toxified the garden so much that it's probably going to take down all of us. But yes, certainly, though previous collapsed civilizations, there is always a remnant of people who don't just die out, they actually reintegrate with more sustainable ways of living and thinking and feeling and doing. Yeah.
Michael, I'm hoping we can get to the next couple of questions. I realize we're coming close to the end of our time. We've had a couple of questions about the title and author of the book that you mentioned right at the very end of your slides. The 5 Stages of Awakening, I think it is.
Yes, I will share. There's actually 6 slides that I want to share. It'll take 2 minutes at the very end. Mostly there's not words, but it will also point people to the resources that I most highly recommend beyond this.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Good. So Nancy? If somebody could take down Paul and Carol's hand.
Yeah, I can do that.
Good.
First of all, thank you so much, Michael, for all of the work that you have done. I think I don't want to speak for anyone else, but I think all of us share your outrage and your strong feelings about what's happening, and we know it and we see it. However, as my my work as a physician and now as a spiritual director, I do agree that I do want to point out that there is a reason you're not talking this way to your daughter or your children, that there is a reason you're not. And I think it's important that we respect our own process, our own spiritual age, and our process cannot be yours. with all due respect to you. And I also think that it's important to avoid predictions. And it's important to avoid predictions. And I've always found in my work, and I still do, that it's so much more important to ask questions, that to remain curious, ask questions, honor, be reverent to what is happening, rather than to make statements about it. So I just want to put in that voice of remaining curious, asking questions, and not letting our strong feelings about these issues take over. We have to protect each other, and hope is one of the ways that we do that. So that's enough from me, but thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. Thanks for sharing all that. Melissa?
Hi. I want to thank you for your work. This is really the first time I've been exposed to it. I wish I could say I didn't agree. I do. I've spent my whole adult life trying to help people to look at the long-term consequences of their actions.
Yeah.
My heart is breaking. But that to me is a good thing. Because emptying out gives me more hope. Nancy, I couldn't disagree with you more. And I'm a spiritual director also. The gift that I am taking from today is really considering what the next 7 or 10 years of my life are going to be about, because they certainly are not going to be about the trajectory I was doing. And the greatest and only gift that I can have and give from my artist meditation and my fighting Matthew Fox and having him plagiarize my work and all of that, is to basically stand in my center as a witch and as a ritualist. Because when I think about my town here in Erie, Colorado, all I can do is invite people to the table and do rituals that keep deepening this down while holding the heart. It's not the role I actually had planned, but I thank you for it, because I'm one of the only people I know that can do this kind of work, to sit in absolute destruction and still make a joke or sing or just defiantly hold humanity in my heart while I also want to punch its lights out. So I'm grateful. And I'm grateful I chose not to have children, because it was because of this I chose not to. So anyway, thank you. And thank you for everyone who's here that has the courage to listen, because is there any, it's the agony and the ecstasy, and what are you going to do except be in it? So thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you. Damien.
You're still on mute.
You're on mute.
Oh, there. I think I'm on mute. Yeah, thanks again, Michael. I just wanted to briefly remind you before you leave that you were going to recommend 4 of the post-Doom conversations, because sometimes I'm going through one at a time, but I get overwhelmed with the 85. So I'm.
Oh, come on. Yeah, no, that's what I'm about to do, Damien. I'm about to take 2 minutes and just describe my own trajectory and the resources that I mean, just the cream of the crop, the best of the best.
Right. I'll get to him eventually, but I was curious about the 4 that you recommend. So
Yeah, I'll share that. Great.
Okay,
so can I do that now, Bob?
Yes, by all means. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go to screen share again. And I'll also be saving the chat, assuming I can, because I want to read everything that's been put in there, and I haven't been able to do that yet.
Yeah, and I'll be capturing that too.
Oh, good.
We'll
That's
find
great.
a way. Okay.
So one of my most important colleagues, Paul Chafurka, he was one of the 2 people, Paul Beckwith and Paul Chafurka. It was in his living, or it was with them in our living room where we were staying in Ottawa 2.5 years ago that the post-Doom project got birthed. And Paul Chafurka is one of these amazing guys who from 2008 to 2013, November of 2013, wrote extensively on a blog called Approaching the Limits. And so many of us have found so much of value in his writings that even though he stopped writing in 2013, because he basically saw that it wasn't going to make a big enough difference, and he just sort of became a monk, or he just sort of withdrew. He's allowed Connie and I to keep his website going. It costs $100 a year. It's just great. But in any case, his 5 stages of awakening. So if I had time, which I don't, I would give the 2 paragraphs for each of the stages. I don't have time to do that, but do please Google 5 stages of awakening, Paul Chafurka. And the stages are basically this. It's just dead asleep, awareness of one fundamental problem, awareness of many problems, awareness of the interconnections between the many problems, and awareness that our predicament encompasses all aspects of life. And that's precisely the pattern that I went through. 2012, I was dead asleep. Prior to 2000, I had an ecological understanding. Thomas Berry gave that to me. And Thomas Berry lost faith in me in my last 3 years. The last 3 years he was alive, because he saw me on this techno-optimist, what I now say hopium direction, and he was disappointed in that. And he never saw the shift that happened for me in 2012. In awareness of one fundamental problem happened on December 3rd of 2012 when I watched this TEDx talk. Climate Change is Simple, the remix, David Roberts. It was life-changing, totally life-changing. In 2013, I started studying 20 to 50 hours a week, became aware of many problems. 2014 and 15, I was into massive activism mode. Connie and I were engaged. We got on the front page of the Salt Lake newspaper, and just very much activist mode. And then in 2015, I read William Catton's book, Overshoot, by far the most important book I've ever read in my life. And I became aware that our predicament encompasses all aspects of life. And since then, I've spent, as I said, 9 years, 12,000 hours of reading and audio recording. I've posted all these freely available up on SoundCloud about abrupt climate change, ecological overshoot, the rise and fall of civilizations, and how to adapt and thrive within this context. And so I've created a number of videos. These are the ones I recommend most in terms of our relationship to the divine, to the living divine, our biophysical. So I'm not going to say more about these right now. You can come back to these, but these are all available from the resources page of the Post-Doom website. And then this one, of course, my most thorough and complete video. But here are the books. Here are the 4 books that I consider really essential for hopium detox and recovery. I mean, if you read one or more of these books, you won't be fighting me. You won't think that I'm deluded. You'll realize, oh my gosh, this is like thousands of years in the making. So many of us consider this the most important book of our life, the most important book of the 20th century. Overshoot, the ecological basis of revolutionary change. And I've recorded the whole thing. And it's all available on SoundCloud. So you can just Google William Catton Overshoot SoundCloud. Summary, overbook, there's just lots of great stuff there. Jack Forbes, prophetic indigenous writer, Columbus and Other Cannibals, the Wetiko disease of exploitation, imperialism, and terrorism. Again, many people consider this the most important book for critiquing civilization. And it is profound. And again, just this 26-minute audio is a great introduction. Jack Forbes, Why Are People Evil? If you want to learn a deeper way of understanding original sin, you got to read Jack Forbes. Andrew Schmuckler, The Parable of the Tribes. You don't have to read the whole book. Just this 1-hour audio are fabulous excerpts and 2 reviews, which are just priceless for really getting the essence of this book that it's difficult to understand the last 7,000 years without understanding this perspective. And then Geodestinies, the inevitable control of Earth's resources over nations and individuals. I was just a part of a team of people that he did a revision, but it didn't get published before he died. But I was in communication with him. He gave me permission to get it published. It's now available as a free PDF. And I've audio recorded 12 of the chapters that were the essence of that book. It truly is the inevitable control of Earth's resources over nations and individuals. These are the TEDx talks and the post-doom conversations I recommend most highly. Catherine Ingram, she was one of the major inspirations for this whole post-doom series, Courage and Acceptance in Troubled Times. And this, Kindness in Harsh Times, is a post-doom conversation she had with her students. And it is right on the money. She and I are completely aligned. My February 2021 post-doom conversation with Joanna Macy, where we titled it To Collapse Well. And this was originally not supposed to be a post-doom. Joanna and I scheduled a conversation that she wanted to give me some feedback on a video I created called Unstoppable Collapse, How to Avoid the Worst. And we had this conversation, and fortunately, I had the presence of mind to record it, because 2/3 of the way through, you can see her, we kept it in the record. She goes, "Are you recording this?" And I was like, "Yes." She's, "Oh, good. Thank you. Thank you." So it's just, wow, is it fabulous. And both of us were in tears at the end. And then Meg Wheatley. These are 2 post-doom conversations. One with the late Terry Patton. I would say Meg Wheatley is probably my closest colleague in terms of heart, mind, soul. She's a spiritual warrior. But this conversation with Terry Patton, and then one she just had a month ago or 2 months ago with Michael Shaw, I included both of those as part of the post-doom series because they're just absolutely priceless. And then this one, nobody's heard of Daniel Dancer, but he has worked with kids for decades. And it is impossible to watch this post-doom conversation without coming to tears at the end. It's just unbelievable. He is such an inspiration. He's known about collapse and quite likely extinction for decades. He learned it from his father. And yet he works with children in schools all over the world, mostly in North America. And it's so empowering. It's so inspiring. So you can find all of that stuff at the Post-Doom website, tons of resources. You could literally make a PhD in hopium detox and recovery just on the resources, and also the conversations page. And the discussions is where you go to the discussions page to learn about the 8-part series that we're having on death and that sort of thing. And the last thing I want to say is that collapse grief is toxic for children and families. Acceptance leading to trust, however, can be deeply nourishing. And this post-doom conversation, 15 benefits of collapse acceptance. You don't get these benefits if you're in denial. You don't get these benefits if you're in bargaining or anger or depression. You only get these benefits with true collapse acceptance and collapse trust. And Jordan and Karen Perry are 2 of my closest colleagues. These are just my distillation of some of the ones I found most helpful. Clarity over confusion, because you get the place of, oh my gosh, of course, of course, of course. When you have the ecological and historical understanding, you lose the confusion, you gain clarity, the blame goes bye-bye, and the blame is replaced with compassion, and love and action replaces desperate activism. It reprioritizes nearly everything around what matters most and what really doesn't. There's a calm urgency to get complete with self, family, others, life, and legacy. It brings our attention home to family, community, what's local, what's joyful, what's meaningful. Freedom from a whole variety of shoulds, oughts, have tos, and freedom for coulds, mights, get tos. Usually an overwhelming gratitude for the gift of just being able to eat another meal, being alive today, being aware, and being able to feel deeply, including feeling grief, which is what lets us know how profoundly interconnected and interrelated we are. As Joanna Macy says, the measure of your grief is the depth of your love. And then expanded sense of self. We no longer identify merely with the skin encapsulated ego. We realize that Gaia is our larger self. The Milky Way is our larger self. The universe is our larger self. And God is a sacred name for all of that. And of impermanence and death as sacred. So I just want to just say something from my heart, which is, and I shared this, I just serendipitously happened to call Gail this morning when she and Bob and Penny were meeting together. And I am so delighted, so honored, so blessed to communicate with a group of people that are grounded in the epic of evolution, the great story, that are grounded in an understanding of creation spirituality, earth spirituality, green spirituality. And the fact that you all have invited me twice to speak to you with this level of just being just as honest as I can be, but hopefully not in a freak out mode, but pointing to some direction of possibility for us. A deep, deep bow of gratitude to each of you for being part of this and for the invitation here. And I am more than happy in the future to either just engage in dialogue or do something else or something different. But I love you all as a community, and I feel akin with you all in heart and spirit. And so I want to be of service or support in just any ways I possibly can.
Oh, thank you, Michael. It was an amazing moment when you called and we were just there on together. So we held the phone up to the computer, to the Zoom, so we could all talk together. And Connie was in the background. So that's part of the social and communal roots of this afternoon's talk. So I understand Penny is still having trouble with her internet. Unless Penny, you're gonna come hello. So I will, what?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so I have just a little bit, I'm going to read a little bit from Matthew's meditation from July 31st. So that Michael turned us on to, and that kind of rounds out what you're saying, Michael, about being kind of kindred spirits and being at the work, this work. So this is by Matthew Fox. There are religious orders in both the East and West that make a great point about meditating on death. Often they make it a practice to have a skull on the dining table where monks eat, for example, so that one keeps in mind the reality of death. This might be construed as a somewhat lugubrious meditation, but its purpose is not necessarily to be that way. Its purpose is to face the fact of life, that we all are mortal and life is short, and we really ought to make the most of our time on Earth. Our becoming nothing as a species, an ex-species, an extinct species, going the way of all of our cousins, the Neanderthals and the Denisovans, and all of the others, we Homo sapiens are, after all, the last ones standing. But for how long? Are we headed to extinction? To nothing? From Matthew Fox, and he's going to continue it, so you can find some more from what he has to say.
Yeah, I have held Matt Fox as an older brother, as a cherished older brother for literally decades. I think since 1988 or 87, and so I'm just delighted that he's also in this hope-free space of compassionate, generous contribution as long as we can.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming today. We've had a good, long exploration, high energy as usual from Michael, and that's much appreciated. And may your thoughts go deep and your acceptance grow large, and your heart become its true purpose.
Yes, thank you, Gail.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And as many of you
Okay.
already are, be the blessing. I'll take that from Michael's words today and last time, be the blessing. And next month, we'll be working with Joanna Macy's new edition of Active Hope. We'll be pulling key ideas from there. So we'll hope you can join us then for that as well. And Margie shared, she's grateful for this community. And one thing I will say, Michael, is you have built community around your words and around what you invite us to deeply consider and discern who we are in the face of this.
Thank you, Penny. I do want to, I think it was Nancy who mentioned before, and I just want to voice something that I think is important, that a lot of us who are over 50 forget. For us, it's a lot about grief sometimes, and about, you know, sort of the death of legacy and the sadness and all. But for many young people, it's the death of dreams, and it's a different grief. It's not so much grief as it is this overwhelming sense that you don't want to give up, and you certainly want to be present to children and families in the most personal and intimate and compassionate and loving ways. And so I cherish the diversity, and the fact that we all don't agree with what I said today feels like a really healthy, good thing to me. So thank you.
Well, next we'll see us all next week. Everybody try out Michael's websites, and we'll all keep growing. So,
Yeah, and I hope to see some of you on the remaining 5 post-doom, no gloom approaches to death, dying, and sacred endings. It's really great.
every 10 days.
Yes, you find that on the discussion page of the post-doom website. Postdoom.com, the discussion page. It
We
has an
get Connie
outline.
Barlow in this next session, don't we?
Yes, exactly. Connie Barlow is leading this next session. Thanks for that, Mark.
Excellent.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.